This is Tinker Diesel Garage. My name's Phil, and welcome to this. That's right, this is the 1968 Ford F100 standard cab and the much sought after short box that already has been Coyote swapped with a Gen 3 5.0 Coyote, and it's got a 10R80 transmission in it, a 4-linked rear end, I believe it's 4-linked. It's already got exhaust. It's pretty much, the drivetrain is fully installed with drive shaft, ready to go. But that's not why we're here, and it's not what we're gonna focus on. I was inspired to do a video series on the one thing that is the gotcha for a lot of DIYers. Now, it seems like a lot of these DIY guys have no problem figuring out how to do a Crown Vic swap, and there's a lot of content online that gives you many options and certain kits, and it's just detailed enough to where you could kind of figure that stuff out for Crown Vic swaps, and even how to install a 5.0 Coyote motor in a truck. But I think the gotcha for a lot of DIYers has been the wiring. Not just the wiring for the control pack, but the various options that are out there. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions and bad information floating around out there that's costing DIYers a ton of money and a ton of time on their builds, and potentially causing them to just give up altogether and sell their project car. And I hate seeing that. So this is probably going to be a 4 or 5 video series where I'm going to go over everything around wiring in the Ford control pack for the Coyote motor, Dakota digital gauges, updated steering column, fuel cell, cooling fans, Restomod air conditioning, stereo system, subwoofer speakers, and so on, lighting, even the horn control, transmission cooler, frame mounted battery, power distribution, fuel level sensors, gear shift position, OBD2 integration with the Dakota digital gauge set, tuning. Yeah, I think that sums it up. But anyways, before we get started, let me give you a quick walk around on this truck and let you know where we're at with it. So as you can see, it's a 1968 Ford F100 short bed standard cab, and like I said, I don't know if this is a Ranger XLT or Sport Custom, whatever this thing is. It doesn't have any badging on it. You can see there's no trim, there's no interior in this thing, it doesn't have a grille. It's basically just metal, and it's got the Coyote swap done on it. So the owner did all the metal, the body work, paint, and all that stuff. All that was previously done, and he did the Coyote swap himself and the Crown Vic swap in this thing. And based on what I'm seeing here, it's really not a bad job. All the mechanical stuff that he did it's pretty sound. It looks like a really good job for a DIY person doing this with the tools and the equipment that he had available. So he's got a lift in his home shop, and in my opinion, I think he did a pretty good job on it. But where he got stuck was he got in so deep with this build and already pre-purchased a lot of the parts, like the control pack and things like that. And I'll go over a lot of this stuff in detail, where and a lot of people do this, but he ended up overspending in a lot of areas that he didn't, and buying stuff he did not need to buy. He got to a point where it was just a little bit out of his expertise when it got into the electrical, power distribution, mounting the battery, the PCM, and all that stuff. And then the body harness, the truck wiring harness, those type of things. And so that's where he brought it to me and asked me to essentially do what needed to be done to get this thing on the road and running. So we're not going to touch any of the interior. And as you can see, it's basically just came from the paint shop. He did the motor and transmission, exhaust, and the Crown Vic swap, and then that is about it. He ended up doing an I Did It steering column, but we've got essentially a blank canvas in here. We're gonna do a frame mount battery and start with the power distribution. That's gonna be on the passenger side frame. We're gonna run our primary cable up here, land it on the inside of the frame down there. Then we'll start mock up for the control pack, the fuse box, the PCM, get all that stuff mounted, and then we'll end up disassembling it, and then we're gonna actually get started on a Restomod AC system. So I'm gonna show the full install for the Restomod air conditioning. There's a lot of stuff on this build that kind of needs to be fixed, like the fuel system. the gentleman that owns this truck, I mean, you can see did some stuff here with the fuel system, and obviously this isn't going to work. So we're going to install new fuel lines. We're going to do AN fittings. This is emission stuff here. It's not even part of the fuel system, but he thought this was a return system, so all that has to come off. And I'm going to go over all that stuff in detail. So fuel cell is going to come out. We're going to do a new fuel sending unit. The fuel pump in it looks like a pretty good aeromotive pump. So we're going to keep that, but I'll go over that with you guys as well. The bed of the truck, I think he's going to end up doing a wood floor bed. Obviously, we're not going to do anything in terms of body work. We're not going to do, you know, door panels or interior or anything like that. I think I looked at it in his shop. I saw some TMI boxes, so I was assuming that that's the full interior kit that he's going to use in this truck. So he's got to do all that stuff, glass and seals and trim and all that. There's a lot of work in that. Like I said, for us, we're just going to do the entire truck wiring harness from the fuse box to tail lights, you know, all the rear wiring harness, the front wiring harness for LED lights and all that good stuff. Let's look at some of the stuff that he's already purchased. Looks like he's got the standard GSS 3000 for Dakota Digital gauges, so we're going to end up using that. And I did a quick peek under the truck, and it looks like he's already installed the gear shifter and the receiver portion, or the potentiometer that sends the signal to this control box here. We're going to mount that up. We've got the control pack wiring harness here, or a portion of it, so he's already bought that. There's the transmission section right there. I don't even know. I haven't even looked through all this, so I don't even know what else is in here. There's the ECU. Looks like he bought the RTX model of Dakota Digital. There's the actual cluster there. There's the control box for the Dakota Digital. He's got, looks like a new dash bezel there. And there's some other boxes as well. So we'll do full setup, and I'll go into detail on how all that's done. All right, so let's walk around the passenger side over here. You can see he ended up, and like I said, the guy's metal work is really, really good. He already tubbed it out, and so he widened the tubs here, and look at that. I mean, it's dusty because it's been sitting in his barn, but he's had this truck for about 10 years. He's been working on this build here, and so the tubs look fantastic. I don't know what size wheels he's got on here. They look like probably 20s or bigger. It's 4-linked, I think, on the rear end. He's already got exhaust installed on it. One other thing that I thought was kind of interesting that he did, I don't know, I guess it's popular, but I've never seen it. Notice all the cowl vents are gone here. So he actually cut all this stuff out, welded in a piece of metal here, and got rid of the cowl here, which I thought was pretty cool. So yeah, we're gonna end up removing the fenders, the inner fenders on the passenger side. We're gonna leave the driver's side. For everything that we need to do, we actually don't need to remove the fenders on this side. But we are gonna pull the core support, that's gonna go. We're gonna have to, when we do the Restomod air conditioning, we're gonna have to install the condenser here, and I've got a couple different options for how I normally do the condenser install on an F100, using certain standoffs and things like that, and I'll show you guys exactly how I do that. Nice clean ways of mounting, like the dryer. A lot of people just mount it over here. I like to hide the dryer up in here. It just looks cleaner. You don't see hoses everywhere, and it, you know, it's just a cleaner look. And I like to dive in right here and put all the AC hoses through this fender, and then ride along the fender going into the truck with the AC hoses. Just a cleaner look, and you can do it without investing a whole lot of time or money into the truck. And you know, then when you look in the engine bay, it's simplified, just looks cleaner. And then next, if you look down here, this is an area that I think confuses a lot of people. And once we take this apart, you'll see it in more detail, but you can see he's still got the oil cooler lines, and he's plumbed that in. it looks, I'm not sure how all that's plumbed in down there, but all that's going to go away. And you can see the original Mustang harness, all that stuff is going to get stripped down, and we're only going to use a couple of wires from that original harness, so all that's going to go away as well. We got, if you notice this brake booster, this came from a Crown Vic. So when he did the Crown Vic swap on this truck, he actually bought an entire Crown Vic donor car. He was originally going to do the 4.6 in this truck, and I believe he already had the 4.6 installed, and then he ended up backing out of it, removing the 4.6, buying a wrecked Mustang, pulled the motor, and then started in on a Coyote swap. So he's been on this truck for many years now, and he's at a point now where he just wants it done, and he wants to be able to drive it. This brake booster, I'm not sure what we're going to do with this, but the pedal is real funky under here. Let's look at this. Let me open up the door and fly you guys in here. So of course we need to mount the Coyote fuel pedal, but this pedal right here came out of the Crown Victoria, and you can see it's just mounted real crooked. It's going to be in the way, and then when we go to mount the fuel pedal for the Coyote, look at that. It's not real ergonomic, and so we're gonna have to do some stuff in here to fix that. But basically that's the truck. That's what we plan on doing to this thing. Like I said, it's mostly just wiring and getting it to the point where we can put the key in it and fire this thing up. For now, I'm gonna put you guys on time lapse, and you can watch me start blowing the front of this truck apart and making access so we can start looking at the front of this motor. We got this all blown apart. Now let's fly in here and have a look at this, and let's talk through some of the stuff we need to do to this thing before we even get started. All right, here's a spot that oftentimes confuses a lot of people if they've never done a Coyote swap before, and they get a junkyard engine. Now, if you buy an engine directly from Ford, it's not really gonna look like this. It's gonna be stripped down quite a bit, but most of the guys that are watching this video, it's probably because you went online somewhere and on eBay or something like that, and you bought a motor from a junkyard or bought a wrecked Mustang, and you've pulled the motor out, and you've got this big bundle of wires, and you've got this guy right here, and this all looks really scary and intimidating. But the good news is almost all of this you're just gonna cut away and throw directly in the trash. Yep, I said it. Don't be afraid of any of this stuff. Now, we are going to keep a couple of things here, but the vast majority of this stuff, we're literally going to cut it away and throw it right in the trash. Now, you've got some options. So the first thing I want to start with is this guy right here. So you see this plug right here? There are two plugs. There is a large power, looks like a number 4 power and ground, and it's got a special type of connector here. Well, this goes to the Mustang GT's EPAS system, or electronic power steering system. Now, if you're doing a Coyote swap, and maybe you've done a Crown Vic swap and you purchase the Range Industries E-Pass setup, where it's a little bracket that allows you to mount the electronic power steering, well, this guy right here you're going to want to keep, because this is going to provide power to the power steering rack, and that's going to be constant power. So you want it to be fused with overload protection, obviously, but that's just going to be constant power right from the battery. You could have a high amperage relay where you have key on signal, but it's not necessary. This could be powered directly from the battery. And then this guy right here, there's really only one wire you need out of this, and I forget which one it is, but it's unnecessary for this particular build, but it's going to be the green with brown tracer right here. And all you're going to need to do there is, when you turn the key on to the ignition, you're going to apply 12 volts to that, and that's going to activate, or essentially kind of arm, the power steering rack, or the electronic power steering rack. There is a 5-second delay, so as soon as you apply 12 volts there, you count off 5 seconds, and then all of a sudden you'll feel the power steering kick in your hand. And so that's a really nice setup, and in my opinion, I don't think I'll ever go back to, on any of my trucks, to having hydraulic-based power steering like the Crown Vic rack. I mean, it's not a bad system, but you got to deal with hydraulic fluid. You got to put in, you know, power steering pumps and deal with leaks and stuff like that. And it's just so much easier to just go with all electric power steering. So in this particular truck, the customer wants to keep the Crown Vic power steering, so we're going to do that. So we don't need this. We're going to actually cut this whole thing out of the harness. The other wire that you see over here, let me fly in here, also attached to this harness, there's a thick wire going up here, and that is going to the back of the alternator, and so you're going to want to keep that one. And so I think that is the only wire in this instance that we're going to keep, is just this red wire. It's covered right now, but it's this red wire that goes to the back of the alternator. We're going to keep that, but we're going to do something special with it. We're not going to let it run all the way over to this harness here. We're going to end up cutting it back right in here somewhere. And over on the inside of this frame rail is where we're going to mount a power distribution block. It's going to be a power terminal right here, and that's where we're going to do a lot of our, like I said, our power distribution, hidden right down here in the frame rail. And then we're going to add another, on the inside of this inner fender, we're going to add a small 2-post power distribution. That'll be for our fans, and then to power our Ford Racing control pack there. So those are the two immediate wires that we're going to end up keeping. Now this big connector right here, in no instance, I don't want to speak for every instance, but in almost every instance of Coyote swap that you do, in an F100 for instance, this is going to go away. So we're going to end up stripping this whole wiring harness right here. All of this stuff is going to end up getting cut away. And we're only going to keep a couple of wires out of here. So like I said, the first one is going to be the big number 1 or number 2 cable that's coming from the back of the alternator. We're also going to keep the power cable that's going to the starter. And then there's also one wire that's going up to the back of this right here. I don't know which one it is right now, but I'll show you here in a moment. But there's one wire that's coming to the back of this that we're going to keep, and that is the trigger to the starter solenoid. And that is going to get cut from here, and we're going to end up wiring that to the Ford Racing control pack. There's also a ground we're going to keep. One ground and 2 power wires essentially is what we're going to keep out of this entire harness right here. So the other thing to look at here is, I'm not sure what all this stuff is. This, like, the customer, he had previously installed this KRC power steering pump right here, and this is a great option right here. It's a little pricey, but it's just a bolt-on KRC power steering pump that gives you a GM style power steering pump that you can kind of bolt right onto the front of your motor, and it gives you power steering where you can power up a Crown Vic rack. And see, there's a little bracket back here, and I've used these before. They're pretty good setups, you know, and there's a few different options. You can go to Power by the Hour. They've got a bolt-on kit that's actually down here in place of the alternator. and then you move the alternator where this is at. Now there's another kit called a Road Runner system that Fat Fender Garage sells, and it's a pretty sweet kit because it gives you the SD7, Sandin SD7 AC compressor in combination with a power steering pump and a power steering reservoir all in one kit. Really prefer that one because you're not changing out a bunch of these pulleys and stuff like that, and it's bolt-on, easy to install. Okay, so those are options that you have there. All right, so now I got you in right here in the center of the engine by the water pump, and the customer had installed a real nice radiator when he did the Coyote swap. But this is something that's often overlooked, and I have been victim of this as well, where I tried to retain the stock Mustang GT upper radiator hose in conjunction with the power steering, the KRC power steering pump. You see, when you install that, there is a double power steering pulley or water pump pulley that you need to install. It's a 3-bolt right here. You take off the old pulley, you install this pulley. But what happens is it extends this pulley out to allow for a second belt that drives the power steering pump. And what you end up with is right here, the weight of this hose ends up rubbing on the power steering pump pulley here. And so this has to be changed out to a straight. Now, Power by the Hour makes a pretty cost-effective option for you to remove this one, and it goes from this quick connect to a ribbed 1.5" style. And I'll throw that up on the screen here. You can get that from Power by the Hour, ships in a couple of days, and it makes for an easy fix for this. But this is something that's often overlooked. The other thing I noticed is when I started blowing all this apart, I noticed that this one, you can see right up in here that it's cracked. And that's probably from, you know, when this particular Mustang was in an accident, you know, it probably crushed in the front end, and a lot of this stuff gets damaged over here. So that's probably how that gets cracked. So this whole assembly, this Y pipe right here, is gonna have to get replaced. And I'll throw a picture of that up on the screen. They're not too expensive. I'm not sure what the cost is, but I know they're pretty cheap. So we're gonna replace the whole thing and put a barbed quick connector right here that goes to 1.5". All right, next let's look at this thing right here. So what we've got is the lower radiator hose that's coming out of the thermostat area. It snakes down here, and then it goes to this really interesting looking T right here, and then you've got 2 pipes that go to what is called the oil cooler. Now, this is oftentimes argued by really intelligent people in Facebook groups that say that this thing absolutely has to stay and you cannot remove it. And some people have no problem removing it. For me, I remove it on pretty much every build unless you, for a couple of reasons, I would only keep it. One, if I planned on doing nothing but racing with this vehicle and I knew that it was going to be at extremely high RPMs for most of its life, I would probably keep it in that instance. Or if I did put this engine in a very confined engine compartment with very little airflow, I would put it in there as well. Now, if you look at some of the F150s where you've got the Coyote motor in there, it doesn't have that oil cooler. Some of them do and some of them don't. But it's not absolutely necessary that you have it. If it's just going to be standard everyday driving and you're not going to be running this engine at high RPMs for long periods of time, you can get by without it. So we're going to end up removing the oil cooler, and I'll throw this up on the screen here. There's a special part you can buy. It's pretty cheap. You spin off the oil filter and you put a hex ratchet on the stud in here, and then you loosen it up and the whole oil cooler will come off. And then there's a short stud that you can screw on there that will allow you to spin an oil filter on. And what's nice about that is, look how little clearance we have down here on the oil filter to the power steering rack. I mean, there's literally a ½ inch, and it makes it very difficult to put the correct size oil filter on here. And you almost always have to raise the engine up on the Crown Vic rack as high as it'll go so that you can get an oil filter on here. And so by pulling this off, you gain 4 or 5 inches here, and then you can also now install a much bigger or higher capacity oil filter on this engine. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna remove this, install that new part, and put a larger Wix or Motorcraft oil filter on here. All right, so what's the next thing we want to talk about here? Well, you're probably going to want air conditioning in your vehicle, right? You know, I mean, especially where I live here in the South, it gets well over 100 degrees in the summertime, and it is not a pleasant place to be in the middle of July in a classic car with no air conditioning, right? So it's without a doubt, no question, I have got to have air conditioning, right? Well, you get up into the Gen 3 Coyote motors and you see the standard AC compressor that comes on these motors. Well, it's got a type of modulated ramp style AC compressor that has 2 plugs that and it gets a command to turn on one plug, and then the other plug it is pulse width modulated, where the AC system calls for it to ramp up and ramp down essentially, right? Unfortunately, with aftermarket AC systems like Vintage Air and Restomod air conditioning, those are basically on-off systems. So you need to run the Ford modular AC compressor, or like the Sandin SD7 AC compressor, and there's a myriad of different options out there for you. You can get, like I said, the front runner system. You can buy that from Fat Fender Garage. I've used that one several times, and it's very high quality, really nice system. So it gives you power steering and your AC compressor that fits the Sandin SD7. Or you can go to Power by the Hour, and there is a 2-piece bracket that you can purchase that will fit up a Sandin SD7. So you can buy the AC compressor, and you can purchase the bracket in one piece that will replace this with the more modular style AC compressor. Now, I chose to go with the Power by the Hour AC compressor, and the reason why I did that over the front runner or the road runner system that gives you the power steering and the AC compressor is because the customer had already installed and invested in the KRC AC compressor, or he had already invested in the KRC power steering pump. So that's already here. We're not going to replace that. All I needed was just the AC compressor, and that's why that kit is pretty cheap. I'll throw it up on the screen here. I think it's like a little over $100 or something like that. It wasn't too pricey. It's just 2 brackets, and then you buy the AC compressor, bolts right up. So these AC lines right here, all these go. The AC compressor goes, and this belt goes because it comes with a new belt when you buy it. And then the next elephant in the room here is this transmission cooler right here. And yep, this one came right out of the Mustang, and it is banged up, but it doesn't seem like it's leaking. Now, I have personally never ran the original Mustang transmission cooler. Normally, when I get the motors, before I ever even install it in a vehicle, I prep the whole motor, I power wash it, I replace all the pulleys. I normally put in a new Ford water pump in it, alternator, all this stuff before I even stick it in the car. But in this case, the customer, did this install, and he wanted to retain this here. I don't like them because it does require you to find a way to mount something like this. That in this case, this thing's all beat up, and honestly, I don't think we're going to be able to save it. We're likely going to have to pull all these hoses back to the transmission and then run a Durali transmission cooler. Those you can get on Amazon. You can get them from Fat Fender Garage or Power by the Hour, or I don't know. There's a number of places where you can buy those things. Personally, I buy them right on Amazon. It's the same thing you can get from all these other places, and I get them for a couple $100, and it comes with AN fittings and a kit, whatever it is you need to install it. Super easy. But I do always buy, there is a fitting that you can purchase from some of those top sellers, Power by the Hour and so on, that will mount on the side of the 6R80 or 10R80 transmission, and it converts these fittings here over to 10 or -10 AN lines, where you can route AN lines directly into your Duraley cooler. So I'm going to talk to the owner of this truck and see if he's willing to make some concessions and do that, because I'm not real sure that we're going to have a lot of success out of trying to retain this here. And for the cost of it, it's really a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things. So it's probably in his best interest to replace it. So we're going to do that. So have a look at this. So all I've kept out of all those wires that were down there, I've stripped all this stuff away, and I've got this one, whatever this is, 16 gauge wire here, and it is a tan with a green stripe on it. That is the starter solenoid trigger. So that's going to get wired up to the Ford Racing control pack. There's going to be a trigger to fire the starter, and we're going to have to work through how we do the neutral safety switch. We run that through Dakota digital gauges and a relay, and we'll make all that look real nice. But eventually the key crank signal is going to eventually go to the control pack, and control pack will send 12 volts on this wire to fire the starter to crank it over. The next one is your engine ground. Now this, in my opinion, this is probably the most important wire in the entire Coyote swap system. If you don't have a good ground from the engine block directly to the battery, you are going to have issues. Now, what I see a lot of times is people will do like a rear mounted battery, where the battery is mounted in like maybe the bed of the truck or on the frame in the rear, and they're going to take this ground right here and they'll ground it right to their frame, and then they have the battery grounded to the frame in the back. And sometimes that'll work, but you're going to be chasing gremlins. And the reason why I say that is, in the 60s and 70s, this frame, the metal here, it's made up of various different alloys. As the ground signal goes from the front of the truck to the rear of the truck frame. And so it's not the most ideal and conductive material to ground everything, all of your sensitive electronics in the front of the truck, to where the battery is in the back of the truck. And you'll see that when we do the install of the power distribution system, we're going to run an aught0 cable from the battery all the way up here and land right on the frame here, and then we're going to land this wire directly to that, so that you've got a home run from the engine block all the way back to the battery itself. And there's a couple other things that we need to land there as well, like Restomod air conditioning. And then the control pack itself, it needs to be grounded directly to the battery. And it says that right in the instructions, but it's so overlooked. And then you get on Facebook, and every week there's somebody that's, chasing gremlins, and it's like, help me, I've got wiring issues. And that's a lot of times one of the issues that I see is just really poor grounding. So This is grounded right to the motor mount on the passenger side. It's standard on all Coyotes, so that's going to go right to the battery. This is constant 12 volts right to the battery as well. This goes to the starter. So you've got on this side, you've got constant 12 to the starter, you've got home run to the battery negative, and then you've got the control pack start signal. That's it. And then you've got this one, whatever this number 2 gauge or number 1 gauge 12 volt wire, and this is coming from the alternator, and this is the charge wire. This is also going to land over here on our power distribution bank on the 12 volt positive coming from the battery. So it's really, we've literally got 4 wires. So I know that scares a lot of people when you see all those wirings and connectors down here at the bottom of the engine. Just calm down. All you need is these 4 wires right here, right? And we're gonna eventually loom all this up and it's gonna look real pretty. We've got some other wires to run in here as part of the control pack, and like fan relay wires and stuff like that will also get tied up in here, but we're gonna make it look pretty later. And apologize, this engine's really dirty. It wasn't power washed or anything like that. So I don't know, I may wheel it out and scrub it down, power wash it, make it look pretty before I put, loom up everything and make it look good, okay? One more thing moving over here, I, for some reason, lost the correct Allen bit that I need to remove this oil cooler, so I got to order a new one. I'm not even going to bother looking for it. I'm just going to order a new one. It'll be here tomorrow on Amazon. So we'll remove that. And I think that's all we're going to do tonight. We'll come back in the morning and get cracking away on more of this stuff here. All right, it is the next day, and I think where we left off last night, I said we were going to start breaking down some of the transmission harness that is on the drivetrain right now. All that needs to get removed, and we're going to install the control pack body harness. Part of that is a transmission harness that's going to go on there. And then after that, we're going to get started on the power distribution, mounting the battery on the frame, and start running some of our primary cables down the frame rail. So the battery, I normally go with like a yellow top Optima battery, and I do a frame mount and then start running all my primary conductors down the frame rail. So that's what we're going to end up doing in this section of the video, and we'll probably close out the video with that. But I spent most of the day really tackling this brake pedal saga that's been going on in here. And if you remember from a few minutes ago, earlier in this video, I flew you guys around inside the cab of the truck, and I'll put a picture up on the screen so you can see what that brake pedal looked like. Now, that pedal has been bothering me, and I almost didn't even sleep last night because of what that brake pedal looked like, right? And you know, no fault to the guy that did it. I mean, he did what he could do with the parts that he had, and would it have worked? Probably would have worked. I mean, it would have been really close to the gas pedal. It would have been an ergonomic nightmare, but that thing needed to get moved, and so that's what I worked on today. Let me fly you guys in here and show you what I did. All right, now I didn't film any of this stuff, but if you recall what the old brake pedal looked like, that was the brake pedal, the bracket, and the master cylinder and booster, the whole assembly from the 4.6 Crown Victoria, where he had harvested the Crown Vic front suspension from. And so we're still running the brake booster and the master cylinder from the Crown Vic, but this whole, the bracketry and this brake pedal itself, I ended up changing all of this stuff out. I had a couple pieces laying on the shelf. This brake pedal actually came from a 2020 Dodge Challenger, and that was left over from parts that I had from doing a Hemi swap not too long ago. But overall, I think it turned out good. I had about 3 hours invested in doing this, and so that's really what I worked on most of this afternoon. So I didn't get a chance to film this or any of the wiring stuff yet. So that's what we're going to do next. All right, so I already took care of a couple of things. I didn't film a lot of this stuff. But I did go through and remove some things that were on the motor. If you remember, there was a part right here. It looked like a little solenoid or actuator. And what that does is if there's vapor overflow from the intake and it needs to be purged, or positive pressure that needs to be purged from the intake, So it's fuel vapors. That needs to go down to the charcoal canister. And so that's what that device did here. Now with the Ford Racing Control Pack, none of that really gets used anymore. And so you've got the connector right here. And normally what I do is I cut the connector off. I do some heat shrink on the wires and I just loom it up right in here and just kind of get it out of the way. But that got removed. I removed some fuel lines that the owner had previously installed. All that needs to come out. We're going to install some AN fittings and braided steel, braided lines. And so we'll go through all that. And it also needs to be a return style system. The other thing I did was, if you look over here, this nipple that's extruding up from this coolant passage right here, well, this actually goes over to the overflow canister, but we're not going to be running an overflow canister anymore. We're going to be running a pressurized system now. And so this really gets plugged. He had previously put on a plug on this, but it wasn't a high temp EPDM plug, so that would have eventually degraded and bursted, and you would have had a geyser shooting up out of here of really hot coolant. So I had a few of these in my toolbox, and I installed a high temp EPDM rubber plug for that. And then over here, now there's other options for this, by the way. There's all kinds of folks online that sell kits where you can cut this off and then you can use this to bleed your coolant system or burp it. You can drill it, tap it, put a plug in it. You can put a temperature sensor in it. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. For me, you don't see it anyways, so I just put a little rubber cap over this with a hose clamp, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. Also right here, there is a vacuum port. This goes over here to the charcoal canister solenoid valve, since we removed all that. That goes away. And what else did I do? Same thing right here. If you look at this, I put this plug on right here. Again, we're not going to be running the overflow canister. He had this going over to the radiator or going somewhere, I'm not sure, but again, I use a 3/4 inch EPDMW high temp rubber plug. Out of sight, out of mind. You don't really see it, and it works really good. Earlier, I was trying to show you guys there was a piece over here that was cracked. And if you look at this right here, I guess this motor was in like a front end collision or something. And so this whole piece right here was cracked, this Y pipe, so that's got to get replaced. I ordered that from Jegs and it should be here in a week or so. So for now, I'm just going to leave it like this to try and keep critters and dust and stuff out of there, but I'll pull it off and replace that. All right, so check this out. So the next thing we're going to work on is we've got to get this transmission harness out of here. When you buy the Ford Racing Control Pack, you're going to get a new harness, not the engine harness. Now, if you're doing this for a Gen 3, you're going to have two harnesses. You've got the engine harness, and then you've got the trans harness. Previous versions of the Coyote, the Gen 1, the Gen 2, had different integrated harnesses, but the Gen 3 has two distinctly different harnesses. So one for the 10R80 transmission, which is this guy right here. It also has this plug right here. This needs to come off, and it starts right here where we're going to end up putting the ECU, and then it's got these plastic zip ties. You just pull on them like this, and it pulls those Christmas tree plugs right here out of the valve covers. And we're going to pull it out all the way down to the back of the transmission. And the other thing that's going to come off of the transmission is also the O2 sensors. On the Gen 3 Coyotes, there are 4 O2 sensors. We are only going to use the front 2 O2 sensors. So the rear O2 sensors, when you see those pigtails hanging down, you could either remove them and cut them out of the harness totally, or you can cut them off and loom them up somewhere, but they actually don't get used. And in fact, the original wiring for the existing front O2 sensors also go away. So let's take a few minutes and get this harness off the engine. There you go. Look, it is definitely much easier to remove this when the engine is not inside the vehicle. So please don't forget to on your build, all right? So yeah, it is basically, it's snaked along the top of the transmission, and it's taped around a little wireway, some cable management. I left that in place because we're gonna run the new one along the same routing. And I went ahead and just cut a bunch of this stuff apart. You see, that's the big plug that goes right into the back of the transmission. Whatever you do, don't try, if you have to pry on this, you shouldn't have to. If you have to pry on this, you're going to break something. What you don't want to do is break that plastic piece in the back of the transmission. Believe me, this little red clip right here pushes up, then there's a tab. It would help if I showed you. This little red clip pushes up, straight up, and then you push in real right here, and it's kind of tough. Push in real hard, and then this tab will lift up. And as you lift up, it will eject itself out of the back of the transmission. So just be careful with that. So there's the front of it right here. There's the back of it. And this whole thing just goes right in the trash. The new harness, trans harness that comes with the Ford Racing Control Pack, it's a little different than if you bought it from Power by the Hour. Power by the Hour makes their own control pack as well, but it's basically very, very similar to the Ford Racing Control Pack. It's just a little cheaper. Again, it's not built by Ford or anything like that, but it's still a good harness and it's gonna work just fine for you. So I'll let you choose where you wanna get it from, but just know that there are gonna be some differences from harness to harness. Now, you look at this one right here. This one came from Ford, from the Ford Racing Control Pack, and there's a difference here. You see this single wire connector here. Well, there is a single wire connector that's part of the accompanying harness, the fuse box and all that stuff. This does not exist on the, and the connector is C1A in line 2 control pack. So this is gonna go to a partner plug that is on the fuse box harness. And I'll show you that in a moment. The one thing I don't like about the Ford Racing Control Pack, and instead of having one big harness here, they split it up into 2 trunks, and you've got the 2 O2 sensors on its own trunk, and then the transmission connector on its own trunk. Yet both of them run along the same pathway to the back of the motor. So that's not gonna work for us. We're gonna actually unloom this entire thing. I'm gonna loom all these guys up together. I don't like this plastic thick loom that they use. I actually use a protective tape, and I'll show you guys that in a moment, but I actually tape this up all the way down, and then I use a heat shield over it, and it just looks nice. It makes it a lot more compact and smaller, and it doesn't have this shininess on it. It's more subdued looking, and I kind of like that. I don't want this really standing out or anything like that. So let's dive into that.
All right, let's get started on this thing.
is now the next day again, and I didn't get a chance to finish this up last night, but we got it done now. So here it is. Come join me and let's go get this thing routed in and installed. Well, one thing's for sure, wiring is time consuming. That's all we're gonna do in this episode, but give it a few days. I'm gonna have part 2 coming out. We're gonna tackle some of this engine wiring. We're gonna get started on buttoning up the front of this motor, getting in the Restomod AC system, and starting in on that American Auto Wire wiring harness. It's gonna be a great episode. Can't wait to see you guys then.